Irony is your friend during the Lenten season. Irony. Man, we can get that emotion. That English expression of irony as Americans, how often these days when you watch the news or hear someone talk to you, do you find yourself thinking or saying, isn't that ironic? Isn't that ironic? Irony sometimes is mystifying. For example, can you guess what the number one shoplifted book is in the United States of America and has been for the past 10 decades? The number one shoplifted book is the Holy Bible. Isn't that ironic? Irony can be bitter. It can be vicious. On that fateful day, November 22nd, I believe it was 1963, in that Lincoln Continental convertible, Nellie Connolly, the wife of the Texas governor, she turns in that middle seat to JFK in the back seat, and over the roar of the crowd in that parade, she says to him, "You can't say that Dallas doesn't love the president." and Kennedy says back, that's very obvious. And only minutes later, maybe 2 minutes later, there was this sickening crack, and pieces of his skull were all over the back of that convertible. And hours later, we had lost the 35th president of the United States of America. And some of the final words that he heard were, "You can't say Dallas doesn't love you." And then he's dead. It's so ironic. Irony can be funny too. In Sydney, Australia, maybe you saw this. One of the prisoners escaped a prison, which is not an easy thing in Australia, and he did it by hiding under the hood of a delivery truck. Who knows how he didn't get burned up or cut up under that hood when the engine started again, but he hid there, and he waited till the car came to a stop and everybody in his estimation was gone, and he let himself out, only to find himself in another prison yard 4 miles down the road. So, isn't that ironic? I started out by saying irony is your friend in Lent because we try to do this in our home during the Lenten season when we hear the familiar story of how Jesus goes that Via Dolorosa, that way of sorrows. We sometimes, I apologize, I got a cold, I think you can tell, but we sometimes ask ourselves, where's the irony in that? Or we even ask, isn't that ironic? And then try to find the irony, because irony, among so many other things, has the capacity to clarify what is true and magnify the meaning and help you to see through all the peripheral, which really doesn't lend any meaning to anything. And that's never more true than when you get to Matthew 27 and you see Jesus in the final steps of his suffering before Pilate and before he's skewered to that cross. Matthew and John are the gospel writers that use irony more than any other writers. And in Matthew 27, Jesus is placarded before us in so many ironic situations. For example, listen to this. This is 27 through 31. And listen to the irony of how they're mocking him. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium. Now that's the barracks of the soldiers that protected Pilate in his Antonia fortress there. And they took him there. Remember, Pilate had him flogged before he's brought there. Okay? And it says that they gathered a whole company of soldiers around him. The Greek word is for cohort. A cohort is 600 soldiers. So we're not talking like 2 or 4 disgruntled soldiers. We're talking real warriors in the hundreds. Into the barracks they take Jesus. He's already been flogged, so the skin's off his back. You could see the gristled muscle and the white of the bone, because remember the flagella had bits of metal and chain and bones in it. And so he's exhausted. He was up all night through the kangaroo court. It's early Friday morning, and they bring him in. And now these are Roman soldiers. These are not volunteer soldiers. These are, man, they've been suckled on the cruelties of the Roman Colosseum, and they have. Check your history, where gladiators fought and traitors were fed to lions. These are men with stubbled beards and pock marks and scars across their body from they're rough-hewn men, quarried from the stony provinces around him, the Roman provinces who hated Jews. And it's the end of a long day, and the smell of sport is in the air. And like wolves who can smell blood, they see this Jew brought in who, listen, now they start mocking him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him, "Hail, King of the Jews." They spit on him, took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put on his clothes. Then they led him away to crucify him. Do you see the irony? It's so ironic. They're mocking Jesus as a king. When in fact, what is he? He is a king. And in fact, if you're thinking, he's not a run-of-the-mill Messiah. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The magnitude of the glory and the greatness of this man who appears to be anything but a king cannot even be comprehended with the logic, the Lincoln Logs of our logic. And yet they are mocking him. When does a person actually become a king? When is it in this life? Isn't it at the coronation event, the enthronement ceremony? And they mock every aspect of that. King got to have a robe. And it's actually the Greek word for a little mini outer coat that a soldier wore. It's not the word for the elongated regal robe that a king would actually wear. And they put it on the back of his wounds, and it turns different colors as the blood soaks in. They form a perimeter around him. They pinball him. Have you ever been pinballed? In high school as a freshman, I used to get pinballed. And maybe one of the soldiers finds a chair. King needs a throne. Sit down on your throne, your majesty. And as Jesus, weak in the knees, looks to try to find that chair and bring relief to his legs, right before he sits, he pulls it out from him. And he goes to the floor, and the whole crowd erupts in laughter. King needs a crown. One of the soldiers found a tinderbox of 3-inch thick thorns and weaved a crown, and they shoved it on his head. And the Eden's curse, isn't it ironic? The very people who were guilty, mankind, of bringing the curse of the ground, the thorns and the Canadian thistles and the barberry and all that, we sinful human beings, they use that to mock him when we brought that into the world. And he accepts it. He endures it. See? They find the reed and they beat him in the face again and again. Maybe they say, guess who hit you, your majesty? Here, let me help you out. And he extends a hand and balls his fist with the other one. And he moves his hand back and smashes Jesus in the face. And you can hear do you get the picture? They're humiliating him. And he's enduring it. You see? He's allowing himself to be mocked as a king, when in fact, he is a king. And what is done in private will one day be revealed publicly. Because remember in Philippians 2, God says to Jesus, he didn't consider equality with God. He humbled himself even to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God gave him the throne, exalted him to the highest place. You see? And one day every knee will bow and every tongue will acknowledge in heaven, under the earth, all authorities will acknowledge that Jesus is the Lord. So every one of those Roman soldiers, if they checked out of life without faith and went to hell, if they repented and went to heaven, all of them, one day on the great getting up day, they will acknowledge publicly that they mocked him in a way that is actually true in reality. For he will reveal his sovereign supremacy over everyone on the final day. And every tongue will say, you really are a king. But here he endures it. You see? He endures it. And think of the greatness of who King Jesus is. It's so ironic that they would mock him. If President Joe Biden would say to Jesus, I don't submit to you. I'm a great authority myself. I am the president of a sovereign nation, the United States of America, by election of the people and by constitutional inauguration and installation. That's who I am. And Jesus could say back to him, okay, but you know what? I am king by the election of God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, by my resurrection from the dead, my indestructible life, and by my installation at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. Which is more majestic? Which is more powerful? And yet, he allows himself to be mocked. Why? Why? Because Jesus is a king whose subjects mean more to him than his sovereignty. Let me say that again. Jesus is a king whose subjects, whose people mean more to him than his prestige. He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. He made himself nothing. He empties himself of all divine prerogatives. And he allows himself to be mocked and beaten and, yes, even crucified, the ultimate act of humiliation, all the while appearing to be utterly powerless, yet at no point is he not transcendently powerful. But his greatest glory is his humiliation, because in his humiliation, he says to you and me, I love you so much that I really would rather die and go to hell than go to heaven without you. I would rather go on a cross and be separated from God and pay your sin than for you to be separated from me forever. Somebody told me the other day, why did Jesus suffer? He suffered because he's like us. I said, what do you mean by that? And he says he loves to be with the ones he loves. Don't you love to be with the ones that you love? I do. Hey, we're going to go visit the grandkids. Hey, we're going to go visit our friends, you know. And he wants to be with you. And he can be. See, because now the justice of God is satisfied on the cross. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was wounded for us. And by his wounds we are healed. And by faith in Jesus, that he died for me and paid the price for my sin and credited his righteousness to me, I live forever with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who loves his subjects more than his supremacy. Isn't that ironic? You see? And you can, when you go like Matthew 27 through 50, there's irony all along the way. In 32 through 37, where he has to carry his cross. Again, I think I mentioned that. He looks so powerless, but all the while he's extremely powerful. He hasn't lost any of his might as the omnicompetent God. How about this? 42. Matthew 27:42. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. See, they're mocking him because he can't save himself. Now, theological question, $10 million theological question. Can he save himself? While he's on the cross, can he save himself? We got a shipment of T-shirts over to Africa when we were missionaries in Malawi, Africa. And it was handing out and all different kinds of slogans and logos. People donated them to the Malawians from all across America. And it led to a little humor. One of the presidents of one of our bush churches loved this red shirt, and the lettering was white, and it said "baby on board." I didn't have the I didn't have the heart to tell him that he couldn't wear it, you know. Or like a good neighbor, State Farm is there in the middle of Africa. I don't think State Farm was there, but one little boy, he had this shirt, and it was a soccer goal, and there was the goalie, and he was blocking the ball out of the goal, diving to the side, and he looked like Jesus. And the shirt above it said, Jesus saves. Jesus saves. And one of the elders said, that's a disrespectful shirt. Because Jesus doesn't save like a soccer goal, he saves a goal. He saves in a deeper way. And we should never be disrespectful of that. And it got you thinking, Joseph named Jesus. He named him. The angel told him, you shall give him the name Jesus because he will, what? Save his people from their sin. That's all. Matthew makes it clear from the very. This is why Jesus has come. Jesus said, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. But here's the irony. He can save himself because of his power. He can pull the nails right out and kill them all. But if he saves himself, can he save you or me? You see, it's so ironic because they're mocking him as if he can't save himself when he's actually what? Saving them. You see? When he's saving them. I don't know about you, but you push the wrong buttons with me. I'm a pretty easy get along guy, but everybody has a corner where you poke the bear. Maybe this is it for Jesus. That's it. You people, I'm dying for you. Why should I? No. He does die for them. And he lets them mock him as one who cannot save himself. When the reason he can't save himself is because he's saving you. Oh man, isn't that ironic? Savonarola taught us to sing during this time of the year. Do we pass that cross unheeding, breathing no repentant vow? Though we see you wounded bleeding, see thy thorn encircled brow. Not if you see the irony. Find the irony in the Lenten story, in the sufferings of Christ. Look at it and say, what's ironic about what's happening for Jesus for me in this moment? And I promise you, it will magnify his mercy. God bless you this Lenten season in growing in a greater appreciation of the width, the length, the height, and the breadth of Christ's love for all of us. Amen.